Okay, so today we are going to be talking about how to read more. This is not a video about how to read faster. I still want you to soak in your stories and enjoy them, but rather how to make more time for reading. If you feel like you love reading and wish you had more time to do it, here are 5 tips that have worked amazingly for me to be able to carve time into my day, find time in my day to be able to be consistently reading. If you're happy with the amount you read, cool, but if you wish that you had more time to read more, these are some tips that have worked amazingly for me. And contrary to the laws of YouTube, according to the rules, I'm gonna start the video off with my best tip that I have. I just realized my bookshelves are a mess. Give me one second. And that first tip is to turn off your screens an hour before bed and read. You've heard this tip before. It's not surprising, but I can tell you that it has been a game changer for me. I've heard this tip a lot in my life and never actually applied it until I saw the study that showed that the blue light that we get from our phones and laptops, TV, etc., actually suppresses our natural production of melatonin, which is what helps us to fall asleep and get a deep sleep. And the advice is, in order to produce the correct amount of melatonin to have a good night of sleep, turn those screens off at least an hour before bed. So I decided to try it out, and it's genuinely changed so much for me. I get a deeper sleep, I fall asleep more quickly, and I wake up feeling much more rested and in a lot better mood. I did this specifically to help my sleep because I wake up grumpy, or at least I used to, but now I feel so much more rested. I get such better night's sleep just because of this one simple thing. Bonus is that I now read so much more because what am I gonna do without a screen? I'm gonna read a book. My kids go to bed at 7, which actually gives me a good chunk of time to be able to chill on my laptop, watch a show, do whatever. I'm usually working. I'm almost always working, but sometimes I play The Sims, and about an hour and a half before the time that I want to fall asleep, I turn off all screens, I put my phone away, everything is gone, and I pick up a book. And I do actually read by lantern light under the blankets. Sometimes Corey goes to sleep before I do, and the light would bother him, so it started out practically, but actually I feel like a kid again when I'm under the covers reading a book, and it makes it so fun. But genuinely, this is the best tip I have for you because it actually affects my day-to-day life, but also I read so much more now that I have a solid hour and a half before bed dedicated to nothing but books, and I know I'm not allowed to pick up my phone, which means whenever I finish a chapter, I don't just mindlessly pick up my phone and start scrolling without even realizing it, which you know we all do. My second tip is to read multiple types of books. You may be reading an epic fantasy that's bigger than an entire brick. You may be reading a really dense classic that you're loving, but that just takes a lot of time to get through. These books will sometimes capture us, and we'll read them just as much and just excitedly as anything else, or sometimes they'll slow us down because it's a giant book, or it's a very dense story, or maybe it's just a book that you want to read, but you're not always excited to read. All these things are fine to read, but having it balanced out with something that's a lot lighter, faster, easier to read can a lot of times, at least for me, keep up my motivation. Something that's really quick and easy to read, or something that's whimsical and childlike that just feels like an escape, or something that's deep and meaningful that's given in little bite-sized chunks so it's quick to read but still provokes a lot of thought. Having a lighter and easier story on the side, a lot of times, at least for me, makes me excited to pick that back up, and I can still be focusing on the ones that might take me, a couple months to get through. Now, I know for a lot of people, reading multiple books at a time isn't really realistic and isn't fun, and that's completely fine. If you don't enjoy reading multiple books at once, a good option is to just do every other. Maybe have an epic or a really dense classic or whatever you're into, have one of those going, and then after you finish that, start something light and fun that you'll breeze right through, and then get into another big challenging book after an easier one. Doing every other a lot of times will also keep up a lot of motivation and excitement. My third tip, and this is my second biggest, bestest tip in the video, is to try different formats. Now, I know you've heard this tip before. Hear me out because there's a little bit more to it than just what you might be thinking. First of all, obviously I love audiobooks. I think that they're great for if I'm reading a story and I'm loving it, but I have to go cook dinner, I can plug in my earbuds and I can continue that story. And I love that I have that option. Plus, as I've mentioned before, I'm dyslexic. I have most of my days I can read and it's fine. I'm a slow reader, but it's fine. But I do have some days where my dyslexia is a lot worse and is hindering me a ton. And honestly, reading isn't really an option for me. On those days, having an audiobook not being where I just can't read a book is instrumental for me. But I don't really want to talk about audiobooks. You know what audiobooks are. What I want to talk about specifically are ebooks. There have been a couple of studies that have observed that people who read exclusively ebook actually read a higher quantity than people who read physically or through audio. But what I want to talk about specifically is having books already downloaded on your phone or Kindle if you prefer it, so that you always have the option to choose a book rather than other things when you're just chilling on your phone. When I'm really mentally drained from the day and I feel like I only have the mental capacity to just sit on my phone and scroll for a few minutes, scrolling is it's an understandable choice. But for me, I find that when I hop on social media and scroll a little bit, my first reaction is to go, I don't have to think. Passive entertainment. Thank you. But I only feel that way for maybe 10 minutes, and then all of a sudden, social media becomes stressful instead of restful. Social media really isn't designed to be restful for us. It might take a load off of our brains for a minute, but the majority of people, it doesn't take a load off of the brain. It doesn't bring us much satisfaction at all. I actually have a video, I'll link it, where I talk about how reading is a more effective and faster de-stressor than most any other thing that we turn to de-stress. So on that note, my recommendation is to always have a book downloaded on your phone, and ideally for it to be one of those quick, easy books that you don't really have to exert a ton of mental energy into, something that you can sink into quickly and then fly through because it's just a fun ride. And when I first started doing this, I actually put timers on all of my social media apps so that I was only allowed 10 minutes a day. I don't use a lot of apps, but so the ones that I would frequent and scroll and be generally unhappy with after I scrolled for a while, I put a timer so that I only had 10 minutes so I could check my notifications, I could interact with the people I need to interact with, but the mindless scrolling had a limit. And then once I was timed out of those apps, all I had left was my book. So if my brain is tired, if I need a rest, I'd sink into this story that would capture me right away and that I loved reading because it didn't take a lot of energy from me. And very quickly, I found that that was bringing me way more rest than those apps were anyway. And so now I just naturally turn to the book a lot faster than I turn to anything else. This is a way to very quickly and effectively find a lot of time in your day because, let's be real, we spend a lot of time scrolling, probably more time than we realize. Which isn't bad. I'm not telling you to stop scrolling. I'm saying maybe put a limit on it if you want to be reading more. My fourth tip is to put a book down if you're not enjoying it. Now, I'm not talking about just quitting a book altogether, just giving up on a book, which I do recommend. I'm a big proponent of if I don't like a book, there's enough books out there in the world that it is okay if I miss out on a spectacular ending. I will put that book down and I will find something that I'm enjoying more. That said, I know that for a lot of people DNFing is hard because 1, I've spent money on this book. I don't want to have wasted that money. And 2, I've spent time on this book. I don't want to have wasted that time. I get it, and I'm not here to tell you to change. What I am saying is that it can be really effective to put a book down for a while, for a period of time. For me, there have been books that I've picked up that I feel like I could like, but I'm just not enjoying right now. So I'll put them down for a few months or even for a year. And then when I come back to that book, I enjoy it so much. Sometimes it's just not the right time for a book, and letting yourself take a break from it and come back to it later can actually make that book a much more enjoyable read. But another option, if you really want to get through this book but don't have a lot of motivation to be reading it at the moment, is, again, I'm going to bring back the option of reading multiple books at once. If you're willing, one thing that's worked really well for me, if there's a book that I really want to read, I don't want to put down, but I don't have that much motivation to read it, is I'll tell myself 10 pages a day. That's my goal. And then I'll have another book that I have more interest in coupled beside it. I read my 10 pages from the book that's challenging me more, and then once I've gotten through those 10 pages, I've made my progress, I've done more than I would have otherwise, and then I switch to the book that's exciting me more. I'm still reading, I'm still loving reading, but I'm also making sure that this book doesn't win. A lot of times when I've done this in the past, that book that's challenging me more, if I'll just read 10 pages a day, then eventually I'll get to a point in the story where it does grip me, and then I won't need that other book beside it. I'll be able to just fully immerse myself in this book, or I'll decide, you know what, this book is never gonna get better. I quit. My final tip, and my thirdly bestest tip in this video, is to join reading groups, whether that be a book club in your area, or more realistically, probably, I don't have any book clubs in my area. More realistically, probably is to join a book group online. I personally, on my Patreon server, have 2 buddy reads that we do every single month. We have channels where we talk about specific chapters in spoiler in great detail. We have amazing discussions about it. And then I also have a separate server that is not Patreon, that is free to access, where we do 1 buddy read a month, and we also have the channels and the discussions and all the good things. They're both linked in the description if you want to join one. In my experience, I enjoy reading so much more when I have someone to talk to about the book. Reading is a really solitary activity, and being able to scream and rage when a book is terrible, or gush and scream if a book is wonderful with other people, or if a scene really affects me in some way, being able to break it down and really talk about it in depth with someone else who's also reading that as well, has been so much fun and motivates me to read a lot more because it's more interactive, and I'm making friends this way. I mean, genuinely, there are so many people that have been on my servers that have done these buddy reads, and we've had meetups, and we've started like real life friendships through these discussions. Strongly recommend finding other book nerds that want to talk about books with you. Okay, there you go. Those are my 5 tips for finding more time to read, for finding more motivation to read, to carving out time in your day to read more books. Again, I'm not necessarily saying to read faster, which you can do if you want to do. I've tried picking up my reading speed, trying to get through books faster. I don't really enjoy it because I don't feel like I get as immersed in the story, and I also feel like my retention suffers. So I'm not necessarily talking about that. I'm just talking about finding time in your day to read more. Hopefully 1 or 2 of these tips have been helpful for you that you want to try out. Feel free to leave your own tips in the comments if there's something that's worked for you. I post videos every Tuesday and Friday. I'll see you again soon. Bye.